Summer 1998, Russia, St. Petersburg. Outside the window, there's a sticky heat typical of a northern summer when the asphalt is already scorching and the air feels heavier than it should. Outside, the few passers-by slowly cross the street and sleepily wander toward the bus stops. At this time, in an office building on the third floor, in a small accounting office, a fluorescent lamp quietly crackles as Alyona Kobotova, a neat woman of about 30, carefully writes numbers in the ledger. The papers are neatly stacked. There are bank forms on the desk, and next to them is a bundle of cash, carefully tied with a rubber band. The cash collectors are said to take the money in an hour. Suddenly, a loud crash echoes through the office. The door bursts inward with a crack, coming off its hinges and slamming against the wall, and two people rush into the room. Black masks cover their faces, and the weapons in their hands leave no doubt. These aren't random rookie robbers. The first one, tall and broad-shouldered, silently points his gun straight at Kobotova's face. The cold steel of the pistol fills her with paralyzing fear, but she doesn't scream, she just instinctively covers her face with her hands. The second one, shorter, with a single practiced motion, tears the telephone wire from the wall and throws it aside, then starts fiddling with the door, attaching a strange device to the handle that looks like a homemade explosive. Money, here, all of it, right now. The first one's voice is steady, without emotion. Kobotova slowly pushes the stacks of money to the edge of the table. A tremor runs through her hands, but she forces herself to stay in control. Then, without a word, the robber sweeps the bills into his large bag with his fist, and suddenly he freezes. His gaze falls on her jacket. There, just below the collarbone, a brooch is pinned. An elegant antique piece with an intricately carved pattern. The stranger hesitates for a moment, then with a sharp motion rips off the brooch. "This is mine," Kobotova blurts out, to which one of the robbers just laughs loudly. "Don't move. If you open the door, you'll be blown up." The second one shouts, and the robbers instantly leave the accountant's office. The click of a lock. Silence. Alyona hears the front door downstairs slam, then the footsteps of running people fade into the noise of the street, and she is left alone in a booby-trapped room. Half an hour later, a distress call came into the duty station of the Krasnogvardeysky District Police Department in St. Petersburg. Alyona Kobotova, barely holding back panic, reported an armed attack on the office of a wholesale and retail trading company where she worked as an accountant. The criminals took the money and rigged the exit with explosives, leaving her no chance to escape. Despite being in shock, she managed to reconnect the torn wires of the telephone and call the police. The investigators and bomb squad arrived at the scene within a few minutes. During the inspection, it was determined that the criminals entered the building through the basement by cutting the shackle of the lock on the door leading to the courtyard. From there, they passed through the utility rooms without any obstacles and ended up in the cashier's office. There was indeed an object resembling a TNT block on the door handle, but after a detailed examination, the bomb squad determined that it was just a dummy imitating an explosive device. The criminals did not intend to take any lives, they just wanted the victims' panic to give them enough time to escape. Kobotova reported that the attackers were wearing masks and dark clothing, but her memories of the details of their appearance remained vague. She was unable to describe the height, build, or speech characteristics of the criminals. According to her preliminary estimates, the amount of stolen funds was about 120,000 rubles. A criminal case was initiated regarding the attack, and its investigation was led by Oleg Shishin, an officer of the Criminal Investigation Department of the Main Directorate of Internal Affairs of St. Petersburg. In his memoirs, he noted that the crime was of a daring nature. It was committed in broad daylight, the criminals were armed, and acted in an organized manner. Forensic experts did not find fingerprints or other traces at the crime scene, which indicated a professional approach. The analysis of the robbers' modus operandi suggested that they worked as a coordinated group. Two went into the cashier's office, and at least one more stayed at the entrance, probably in the car. But neither the residents of the nearby houses nor the company employees noticed any suspicious vehicles in the area. Questioning the staff showed that the robbers acted swiftly, spending the minimum amount of time on the crime.
You know, it felt like they knew everything here.
They navigated the building well, knew the location of the cashier's office, and had planned their escape routes in advance. This suggested that they had an informant among the company's employees, or a deliberate accomplice, or someone who had inadvertently revealed important information. A list was compiled of people who knew about the movement of funds and the cash pickup schedule, including former employees. A check of all possible suspects began. Besides the money, the criminals also took an antique brooch from Kobotova, which seemed strange. The woman remembered that one of the robbers was laughing while holding the jewelry in his hands.
I was laughing, ma'am.
The investigators sent the description of the brooch to pawn shops and antique stores, but they were unable to obtain any information. Kobotova said that the piece of jewelry was especially valuable to her because it was the reason she met a man named Yuri with whom she started a romance. They met by chance at the movies, and Yuri, who introduced himself as a jewelry expert, noticed the brooch. Their relationship developed rapidly, but a week before the attack, he suddenly left on a business trip and stopped getting in touch. Kobotova had no photo of him and didn't know his address. Their meetings always took place at his initiative in places where she had no way of finding out who he really was. Investigator Oleg Shishin noted that such a coincidence looks suspicious, but it's not enough for a solid case. Kobotova continued to insist that her acquaintance Yuri could not have been involved in the crime. Nevertheless, investigator Shishin decided to wait for his return and conduct an interrogation. All the more so because Kobotova promised to arrange their meeting so that he could prove his innocence. But several days passed and there was no news from her. Before the detective had a chance to follow up with the accountant, alarming news arrived. A new attack had occurred in the same area. It matched the first one exactly. Armed criminals, a wholesale and retail trade office, a fake explosive device on the cashier's door, no traces, a carefully planned robbery.
The meeting continued.
The meeting with Kobotov was still ongoing.
The investigators were finally convinced that the gang was acting on a tip. This time, the criminals were perfectly familiar with the area and knew exactly when and where large sums of money appeared in the cash offices. The investigators interviewed all the employees again, including those who had been dismissed, and thoroughly checked them for possible involvement. The information collected was compared with the data from the previous crime, but no connections were found. The evidence did not point to any specific suspect, and information about the raiders remained extremely scarce. Meanwhile, the raids continued. The criminals felt they could act with impunity and began acting more boldly, widening the area of their attacks. In addition to the Krasnogvardeysky district, robberies also occurred in other parts of St. Petersburg. Investigators began working around the clock. Investigators still had no leads. Another raid took place in the Kirovsky district of St. Petersburg, where the bandits, brandishing weapons, broke into the checkout area of an outerwear store. They used the same tactic again. They took the cash register and disappeared. The investigators once again heard familiar words from the victims. So, the cashier Galina Alexieva explained that a large bag was brought into the cash office 15 minutes before the attack. And she got the impression that the robbers knew the layout of the building's rooms very well during the raid. Rumors about the daring raid quickly spread throughout Petersburg, causing concern among private business owners. Fearing attacks, entrepreneurs began to strengthen security and review their safety measures. Even in criminal circles, what happened came as a surprise. Law enforcement sources reported that the crime was not connected to the well-known groups that controlled the business. Moreover, the city's crime bosses themselves were surprised by such audacity and professionalism. Such newcomers had never been seen before in the city's criminal world. All the affected businesses were engaged in wholesale and retail trade, so the investigators were expecting a new attack on a similar company. Attempts were made to predict the next target, but the course of events turned out to be unexpected. Another report. The report of an armed raid did not come from a trading company, but from a private dental clinic. However, this time the criminals were not successful. The circumstances worked against them. When they attacked the private dental clinic where they thought there was a large sum of money, they found only 100 rubles in the safe. As it turned out later, the cash pickup crew had changed their schedule that day. Besides that, this robbery was also notable because, for some unknown reason, one of the robbers handed a small antique brooch to the accountant, Natalia Kislytsyna. The brooch was shown to Kobotova, and she recognized it immediately. It was the very same brooch that had been stolen from her during the first attack. Investigator Oleg Shishin told Kobotova in order to gain her trust that the brooch would remain as physical evidence. But in time, it would definitely be returned to her, and he would do everything possible to make that happen. And then Kobotova admitted that after the first robbery, her mysterious admirer never showed up again. This only increased the interest in his identity. While thinking about the investigation, Shishin noticed an important detail. There was quite a lot in common between the two accountants, Kobotova and Kislytsyna. They were united by their age, appearance, and even similar failures in their personal lives. But most importantly, both women worked as accountants. While reviewing the footage from the last crime scene, the investigator noticed a detail in Kislytsyna's interrogation that he had somehow missed at first. She said that when the criminal burst into her office, he took the key to the safe from the top drawer of the cabinet without any prompting, which meant he knew in advance where it was kept. Such information was unlikely to be widely known, which made Shishin wonder who could have obtained it. Arranging another meeting with Kislytsyna, he asked her the obvious question, and, as if anticipating the answer, he heard the familiar name Yuri. It all happened again. It turned out that, like Kobotova, she had briefly dated a man she knew almost nothing about. Not his last name, not his address, nor his place of work. The name Yuri came up for the second time, but an unexpected complication arose. After comparing the two composite sketches of Yuri, made with the help of Kobotova and Kislytsyna, the investigators saw that these were completely different people. The investigation found out that Kislytsyna was planning to meet her suitor and go out of town together over the coming weekend. To identify Yuri, they put the girl under surveillance and monitored her phone conversations. However, this did not yield any results. The trip fell through, and in conversations with her friends, Kislytsyna only wondered why her lover had suddenly disappeared. Attempts to identify the man among the employees of the affected enterprises were also unsuccessful, so this version was put on hold for a while. A new development in the case arose when Oleg Shishin sent a request to the Analytical Department of the Criminal Investigation Directorate of the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs to find out whether the trick with the fake explosive device in the form of a TNT block had been used anywhere else in the country. The response from the analytical department brought unexpected results. It turned out that the method of planting a fake TNT block explosive used by the criminals in St. Petersburg had only been encountered once before, in Chelyabinsk in 1998. At that time, an unidentified person took the life of a certain Degtyaryov, an alcoholic who led a questionable lifestyle. A fan cord was tightened around his neck, and a fake explosive device was left on the door. At the time, it was unclear why this was done. Unfortunately, due to YouTube censorship, I can't show some documentary materials, so I'll post them on the Strashnoti Telegram channel. Go ahead, subscribe and watch. The link is below the video. It turned out that Degtyaryov was married for the second time to a woman with the last name Gudo, who lived in St. Petersburg for a long time. Moreover, her son Dmitry Gudo had previously been prosecuted for committing crimes in the same city. Although Dmitry had threatened to kill his stepfather more than once, when his stepfather was murdered, Dmitry was already in prison. However, the investigators developed a new hypothesis. He might not have been the perpetrator, but the one who ordered the crime. A request to the penal colony where Dmitry Gudov was held helped determine what connections he had in prison. One of his close acquaintances was a repeat offender, Yuri Glinistyy, nicknamed Graf. This man was released before Gudov and lived in a village near St. Petersburg. Moreover, at the time Dektyarev was killed, Glinistyy was already free. To check Glinistyy's possible involvement in other crimes, Shishin turned to his colleague, the operative who was investigating intentional homicides, Andrei Ilyin. His answer was unexpected. Ilyin had been searching for this person for a long time, but for a completely different case. Earlier, in the Kirovsky district of St. Petersburg, the body of a man named Sharmatov was found, killed in the corridor of his apartment by 3 shots to the head. There was chaos in the apartment itself. Obviously, the criminals were looking for valuables, but the key to the mystery came from the phone's caller ID. On the answering machine of the deceased, there was a contact for a certain Victoria Afanasyeva, whose home was searched by investigators. Afanasyeva tried to hide the name of her accomplice, but the investigators made it clear to her that in that case, all responsibility for the crime would fall solely on her. Under pressure, she gave the name of the criminal. It turned out to be Yuri Glinistyy, known in the criminal world as Graf. During the crime scene reenactment, she described in detail how the crime was committed. She arrived together with Graf at her acquaintance Sharmatov's place, and he, suspecting nothing, opened the door. Glinistyy immediately shot the businessman in the head 3 times, and then the 2 of them began searching the place, stealing everything valuable. The case could be considered solved, but the main task remained to find Graf. Afanasyeva didn't know where he was hiding, so the investigators tried to reach him through his parents, who lived in the village of Glinistyy in the Leningrad region. As it turned out, Glinistyy had been there quite recently and had brought his fiancée with him, a certain Marina Arkhiptseva. After visiting the village, Glinistyy went back to St. Petersburg, but his parents couldn't provide a specific address. The investigators kept looking for any leads. Shishin decided to show Glinistyy's photo to employees of the companies that had been attacked, but it didn't yield any results. None of the victims recognized him by sight. Meanwhile, new information emerged. Glinistyy's girlfriend, Marina Arkhiptseva, was being searched for by her younger sister Nina, who came to the police station and filed a missing person report for her sister. Andrei Lane decided not to miss the opportunity and went to Nina's home, where she not only showed him the apartment, but also told him that she lived not only with her sister, but Glinistyy had also lived with them. At the same time, no one had seen Marina or her friend for several weeks. Ilyin shared the results of his group with Oleg Shishin, but he was simply stunned. The thing is, the apartment that Graf rented with his beloved was at 4 Ropshinskaya Street. It was in the same building, just 1 floor below, that the accountant of the dental clinic, Natalia Kizlytsina, who had previously been attacked, lived. That means, even if she didn't know Glinistyy personally, she must have seen him and recognized his face. Oleg Shishin decided to conduct a kind of psychological experiment to show photos of Glinistyy among other possible suspects to Kizlytsina and Kobotova and secretly observe their reactions, since he suspected they were hiding something from him. During the interrogation, he called the women in one by one, asked them to identify anyone in several photos, and then, under a made-up pretext, left the office for a short time. At this time, a hidden camera was recording their behavior. Both women consistently picked up the photo lying at the far left of the row. It was exactly there that the photo of Yuri Glinistyy was placed. But when Shishin returned, both Kizlytsina and Kobotova categorically stated that they didn't recognize anyone in the photos. Everything became obvious. Both Kizlytsina and Kobotova had an affair with Yuri Glinistyy. Moreover, when a similar test was conducted with Galina Alexieva, the cashier of the warehouse in the stores in the Kirovsky district, she also hesitated when she saw the photo of Glinistyy, but then said that she didn't recognize anyone. By the way, in the meantime, I want to remind you that Strashnota is only on YouTube and Telegram. If, however, you happen to be watching and listening to Strashnota on VK or Rutube or Yandex.Zen, then those are pathetic pirated copies and re-uploads. Watch the original on YouTube. Meanwhile, Shishin came to a final conclusion. None of Glinistyy's 3 lovers intended to betray him, and they were lying to the investigation. Their connection with the criminal was so strong that even under pressure from the investigator, they kept silent. Kobotova, Kislytsyna, and Alexieva were placed under constant surveillance. But despite expectations, Glinistyy did not make a single attempt to contact them. Shishin understood that for the Count, his former lovers were expendable. Nevertheless, he couldn't rule out the possibility that he might appear in their lives again. But days went by, and the criminal still didn't make himself known. The gang seemed to have vanished into thin air, lying low, and finding Glinistyy by any other means became almost impossible. After some time, in early September, the Krasnogvardeysky District Police Department of St. Petersburg received a report about a new armed robbery. This time, the target of the crime was the cash office of the largest dairy plant in the northwest region, Piskarevsky. Police officers were immediately dispatched to the scene of the incident. Investigation and operational teams from the special forces were sent under the leadership of the head of the homicide division of the Krasnogvardeysky District Police Department of St. Petersburg, Alexei Kotolevsky. According to Alexei Kotolevsky's recollections, when the group arrived at the scene, it turned out that the criminals had already been detained by the company's security service employees. At the same time, there was a shootout between the guards and the attackers on the factory grounds, and there were people wounded. According to eyewitnesses, the criminals acted cold-bloodedly. They entered the premises posing as business owners, waited for the right moment, put on masks, broke down the cashier's door, burst inside, and threatening violence, forced the cashier to open the safe with the money. But the cashier, despite the threats, managed to press the panic button, which sent a signal to the security post's control panel. The security service acted promptly. The security service was quick. All the exits were covered, and the rapid response team rushed to the cashier. Realizing that their escape route was cut off, the criminals tried to get away. One of them went up to the roof and seeing the guards jumped down.
Then I see a guy jumping from the roof. I ran up and he has a pistol.
While falling, he managed to pull out a pistol and opened fire, wounding 2 people. But the guards quickly subdued him, knocked the weapon out of his hands, and neutralized the attacker.
We ran up closer to him. I already kicked the pistol out of his hand, and we subdued him, just pinned him to the ground.
The second attacker decided to take advantage of the chaos, left his weapon and mask, and wanting to escape with the civilians, calmly headed for the exit, but was detained. The wounded criminal was taken to the hospital under heavy guard, and the second one was taken to the Glinistyy detention center, but the detainee refused to give testimony. The audacity of the attack made Kotolevsky turn to the Criminal Investigation Department for additional information, Main Directorate of Internal Affairs of St. Petersburg. There he met with Oleg Shishin, who was investigating a similar series of attacks. When Shishin showed his colleague photographs of the suspect, Kotolevsky immediately recognized the man who had fired at the dairy plant. It was Yuri Glinistyy, the very same Graf. The investigators immediately went to the hospital to question Glinistyy right there, and he did not hide his identity and, introducing himself, began to give testimony. He did not deny his involvement in all the crimes committed. At the same time, he refused to name the other members of the criminal group or reveal their whereabouts. The investigators did not believe his testimony and understood that such selective candor could be part of some kind of game. Soon, Glinistyy was discharged from the hospital and transferred to the Glinistyy detention center, where his behavior did not change. He continued to remain silent about his accomplices. The investigation believed that Glinistyy would try to escape, and soon these suspicions were confirmed. The operatives were able to intercept prison correspondence, which made it clear that Glinistyy was counting on help from the outside. To outsmart Graf, the investigation decided to secretly send him fake letters from his friends, which said that they would supposedly rescue him during the next investigative reenactment, and Glinistyy believed it. He was taken out to verify his testimony, but the expected fabricated attack did not happen, and the investigation managed to convince Glinistyy that his friends had deceived and abandoned him, never fulfilling their promises. When the hope of escape collapsed, Glinistyy, thinking that his accomplices had betrayed him, began to testify. During another interrogation, he gave up his accomplices, naming all the members of the gang. As a result, Dmitry Gudo, Sergei Gelmanov, Alexander Sushchenko, Igor Kramarenko, Alexander Vakumov, and Igor Lukyanenko were detained. It was at this moment that the two criminal cases were joined, the series of robberies at the cash offices and the attack on the dairy plant, and the investigation of the major criminal case against Yuri Glinisty's gang begins. Yuri Glinistyy, who had an impressive criminal record and experience in theft, robbery, and armed robbery, was ambitious, a dreamer. He dreamed of creating a gang independent from criminal authorities, which would carry out contract killings all over Russia. He wanted to go beyond ordinary gangster activities and form a team of professional hitmen. During his last prison term, Yuri Glinistyy met Dmitry Gudo, who hired him to kill his stepfather, Degtyaryov. After his release, Glinistyy went to Chelyabinsk, gained Degtyaryov's trust, got him drunk, and then strangled him. This was the first killing he committed. After returning to the village of Gostilitsy in the Leningrad region, Glinistyy began to re-establish his old criminal connections. Soon after, Dmitry Gudo joined him after serving his sentence, as he still owed him for that specific service, followed by young St. Petersburg criminals Sergei Gelmanov, Alexander Sushchenko, Igor Kramarenko, Alexander Avakumov, and Igor Lukyanenko. They all knew each other since school. They lived in the same neighborhood and were just starting their criminal careers. Glinistyy understood that it was too early to involve the young gang in contract killings right away. He started with raids, where the punks could toughen up and develop certain skills. To unite the team, he often organized various hangouts for them, drinking parties, saunas, women of easy virtue, and all that, apparently including blackjack. Glinistyy wanted the good and easy life to become a habit for them, and for the idea to stick in their heads that the only way to achieve it was through crime. He did all this so they would have no way back. Besides, he often filmed the gangsters during their visits. They didn't pay much attention to it. They thought the Count just had a hobby like that and wanted to capture them as a keepsake. But in reality, the leader used the recordings as a way to control them, filming each member in profile and full face, recording their conversations about planned attacks. This could become compromising material to control the group. You can't talk your way out of it. This is the criminal world. It's collective responsibility. That's exactly how Yuri Glinistyy himself commented on his way of disciplining street punks. The criminal activity of Glinistyy's gang was gaining momentum, and success in criminal operations only strengthened his authority among his subordinates. Moreover, the leader had a trait that set him apart from other criminals and made him stand out. He knew how to charm women and successfully used this skill in his criminal schemes. His acquaintances with female accountants, cashiers, and other employees of financial departments were often not accidental. They were part of a carefully thought-out plan to prepare for future raids. Glinistyy chose a target, found an approach to them, and built a trusting relationship. He knew how to start a conversation, how to win attention, and how to adapt to his interlocutor so that he could use the information he obtained at the right moment. He skillfully manipulated women who had no idea they were just tools in his game. The Count himself commented on it this way: if a beautiful woman is walking by, you have to approach her and simply test your abilities. Go up and start a conversation with the woman. It all depends on how the man started the conversation, whether he managed to find the right approach. Yuri Glinistyy regarded all female financiers purely in a utilitarian way. He needed them to find out all the details about storing and transporting money. However, one accountant still managed to outplay him. One day, Glinistyy met Marina Arkhiptseva, an accountant at a private company. Unlike many of his other victims, the girl did not fall for his tricks. When Glinistyy tried to give her that very antique brooch as a gift, she refused. Nevertheless, the relationship that had started again with difficulty seemed to continue and develop in an unusual way. Soon, unexpected changes began to occur in the leader's behavior. Glinistyy cancelled the planned crime on the eve of it, the very one for which he had seduced Arkhiptseva, which caused confusion among his accomplices. What caused even more concern was that Graf was spending more and more time with Marina. He ignored their noisy parties with alcohol and easy women. While Glinistyy and Marina were at the cafe, he rented an apartment for them, where soon Marina's younger sister Nina also started to appear. He got involved in this story once. He rented an apartment for them, where soon Marina's younger sister Nina also started to appear. He was glad about that. Wanting to maintain the relationship, but without revealing his real activities, Glinistyy came up with a story that he was a secret agent working on a dangerous mission to infiltrate a criminal group.
He works for some kind of secret agency? Something like a national security agent?
According to him, he was constantly at risk of being exposed, so Marina was forbidden to mention him to anyone. A few weeks after they met, Glinistyy demanded that Marina quit her job, explaining that he was able to provide for her himself. The girl obeyed, but soon after, the company where she worked was robbed. An even greater shock awaited Marina later when the victim of the gang turned out to be her acquaintance, the owner of a chain of kiosks. Earlier, she had casually mentioned his name to Glinistyy, telling him about the attention he had shown her. Soon after that, the businessman was attacked. During the assault, the criminals shot his dog and seriously wounded him. At first, Marina didn't realize the obvious connection between these events, but soon she understood that her chosen one was not a hero or an agent, but a criminal who had organized a series of brutal raids. She couldn't bring herself to break up with Graf for good. She hoped that her love could change Glinistyy, make him leave his criminal past behind, but this path turned out to be hopeless. On the contrary, their relationship began to fall apart because of Glinisty's infidelities, which he committed to obtain useful information for future attacks. So one day, when Marina was not at home, their downstairs neighbor, Natalia Kizlytsina, who worked as an accountant at a dental clinic, came to see him. An affair began between her and Glinistyy, which soon ended with the robbery of the clinic, but the heist turned out to be a failure.
В кассе было всего 100 рублей.
This caused a storm of indignation among his accomplices, and as a result, Graf's authority in their eyes began to rapidly decline. For the gang, this was the last straw. The accomplices began to seriously consider that their leader was acting more and more in his own interests rather than for the common cause. But the blow was not only to Glinistyy's criminal reputation. Marina also found out about the affair with Kizlytsina, which caused her to fall into a deep depression and become addicted to illegal substances, trying to numb her pain that way. It was then, for the first time in a long while, that Glinistyy was truly afraid for her. He tried to save Marina by sending her away from the criminal environment to his hometown village where his parents lived. Meanwhile, a split was brewing within the gang. The accomplices were increasingly discussing their leader behind his back, voicing complaints to each other, and the atmosphere at their meetings was becoming more and more tense. According to the laws of the criminal world, there was only one solution to this problem: eliminating the leader. Glinistyy himself was not stupid. He understood everything and saw that the situation within the group had reached a boiling point. The people he worked with now saw him and his weaknesses as a threat to their common cause. At the same time, it should be noted that in the criminal world, there was no such thing as leaving of your own free will. Anyone who became the weak link was either eliminated or got rid of their own weaknesses with their own hands.
These are my friends, I work with them.
One day, Graf's subordinates decided to stage a coup within the gang and went to him to get rid of the lame horse. But he, armed with a pistol, met them, unwilling to give up his position. Once friends and comrades, they pointed their guns at each other's faces, but after a brief negotiation, Graf's accomplices backed down. This temporarily saved his life. Glinistyy had to make a choice, as the situation around him became critical at that moment. Any careless move could cost him his life, and then his former friends would no longer care about the backstory, wouldn't empathize with him, and wouldn't share his feelings. They would simply get rid of him as an unnecessary element. Glinistyy himself, recalling these events, said the moment had come. To eliminate me. They came for me, I mean these are my friends, I work with them, you understand. But it's such a cesspit. They told me that at this moment, you man can't work with us, and we can't let you go either. I was ready to shoot at any moment because I knew they would kill me, but no one tried to make a move, so we had to part ways. He promised Marina to quit crime. Hearing this, the girl was on cloud 9, and then the couple went out of town for a picnic to celebrate their new life. The Count, as usual, was filming their date with a camera. Marina was happily walking through the fields, weaving a wreath of flowers, and laughing. She was telling her boyfriend something. During the walk, when they reached the forest, the Count turned off the camera and carried out the death sentence by shooting Marina, thus preserving his position in the criminal world. Chapter: Glinistyy. He called this murder routine, but after Marina's death, Yuri lost control of himself, became irritable, aggressive, and started using drugs. After some time, Victoria Afanasyeva appeared in his life, the complete opposite of the naive and bright Marina. She had been involved in the criminal world for a long time and didn't see the Count's activities as something bad. On the contrary, she was drawn to criminals. It was then that Afanasyeva told Glinistyy that she had met a jeweler, a certain Sharmatov, and he decided he had found something to profit from. They went to the man's home, and when he opened the door, the Count shot him in the head without hesitation. And only later did it turn out that he was not a jeweler at all, and Afanasyeva had sicked the Count on an ordinary geologist, which even shocked the accomplices with the senselessness of the leader's actions. That was when the gang finally fell apart. The members of the group realized that their leader had stopped preparing crimes as carefully as before. Moreover, he became completely unpredictable and extremely dangerous, even to them. Glinistyy himself realized that he had reached a dead end and needed a large sum of money to disappear. To get it, he suggested to his accomplices that they attack a large dairy factory, but only Gudo and Lukyanenko agreed to the scheme. The others refused to help the Count. On November 6, 1998, during the raid on the dairy plant, everything did not go according to plan. Lukyanenko, who broke into the cash office with Glinistyy, refused to take part in the shootout and, abandoning his commander, tried to escape. And Gudo, who was sitting in the car outside, heard the sounds of gunfire. Without waiting for his comrades, he immediately left the factory grounds. This was the end for the gang, which, after making a loud entrance at the very beginning, quickly rose to prominence in St. Petersburg's criminal underworld, but just as quickly faded away. Next, let's move on to the verdict, but before that, let's try to understand what kind of personalities these criminals and their involuntary accomplices had. Victoria Afanasyeva, an accomplice, led to the death of Sharmatov. Personality type: sociopath, accustomed to crime. Predatory femininity, manipulated both men, Glinistyy and the victim, Sharmatov. Lack of morals, incited Yuri against an acquaintance for profit, adapted to a criminal environment. Unlike the naive accountants, she didn't believe in the heroic legend. Motivation, profit, closeness to power, criminal thrill. Marina Arkhiptseva, the only one who influenced Glinistyy emotionally. Personality type: empath, romantic with depressive tendencies. Vulnerable, she became emotionally dependent on Graf. Idealization, she didn't believe for a long time that her beloved was a criminal. A need to save, she hoped to change Glinistyy with love. Self-destruction, after betrayal, illicit substances, withdrawal into herself. Motivation, love, intimacy, belief in the possibility of changing another person. Alexander Sushchenko, Sergei Gelmanov, Igor Kramarenko, Alexander Avakumov, Igor Lukyanenko, perpetrators. Personality type, generally young criminal punks, followers. Conformism, they followed Glinistyy for an easy life. Immaturity, they were enamored with the glamorous image of criminal success. Low moral maturity. They didn't realize the consequences until they started to suffer personally. Flexibility under pressure, they refused to participate when the leader became dangerous. Motivation, money, status, the feeling of family in the gang. Natalia Kizlytsina and Aliona Kobotova, victims but potential accomplices due to negligence. Traits, naivety, loneliness, they fell under Graf's charm. Depression, they didn't turn in the criminal even under pressure. Emotional dependence, Glinistyy fit into their emptiness. Motivation, love, need for closeness, fear of loneliness. Dmitry Gudo, co-organizer, the one who ordered the stepfather's murder. Personality type, antisocial, easily influenced. Traits, impulsiveness. He bluntly ordered his stepfather killed without thinking about the consequences. Dependence on strong figures, joined Glinistyy after being released. Low initiative, did not show himself as a leader, was more of an aggressive enforcer. Motivation, revenge, a sense of power as part of the gang. Yuri Glinistyy, Graf, gang leader, manipulator, murderer. Personality type, a psychopath with traits of narcissistic and antisocial personality disorders. Traits: high intelligence and strategic thinking, planned complex raids, played several steps ahead, lack of empathy. Taking lives was routine for him. He killed Marina after a picnic without showing any obvious remorse. Manipulativeness. He charmed women to get information, while at the same time secretly recording his accomplices on video for blackmail. Narcissism. He wanted to create an independent criminal empire, to be the boss. He was even pleased by the official recognition as a gangster in the verdict. Paranoia, control. He recorded all his accomplices, keeping them in fear. A need for domination. He led and suppressed others, but when he became weak, he became vulnerable to betrayal. Motivation, power, money, recognition, the illusion of control. He used crime as a path to greatness. A psychological profile of the gang as a whole. The leader is a narcissist with sadistic and controlling tendencies. The perpetrators are lost, easily led, and immature. The women are instrumental victims, part of the leader's strategy. The group operated like a cult cell, where the charismatic figure at the center dominated everyone until his personal weaknesses destroyed the system. If you want to order a portrait, use the link in the video description. Check it out, place an order, it might be interesting. On January 27, 2003, by the verdict of the St. Petersburg City Court, Yuri Alexeyevich Glinistyy was found guilty of creating a stable armed group with the purpose of attacking citizens and organizations. He led such a group in committing 11 armed robberies involving violence dangerous to life and health, as well as the use of firearms, in 3 cases of taking lives, in 4 attempted murders in the illegal acquisition and possession of prohibited substances, as well as in the illegal acquisition, possession, and carrying of weapons and ammunition. He was sentenced to life imprisonment to be served in a high-security penal colony. Interestingly, Judge Valery Zhukov accepted the charge of banditry against Graf, which was quite rare at that time. Usually courts preferred to avoid this article, breaking up banditry cases into separate episodes. It is telling that Glinistyy did not appeal the verdict. The official recognition of him as a bandit seemed to only flatter his ego, which was also evident from the fact that Graf promised to write and publish his memoirs in prison, since he had plenty of time for that. Igor Lukyanenko was sentenced to 16 years in prison, while Alexander Vakumov, Dmitry Gudo, and Igor Kramarenko each received 10 years. Each of them was sent to a high-security penal colony to serve their sentence, while Viktoria Afanasieva received 5 years in prison for aiding and abetting, with her sentence to be served in a general regime colony. At the time of Glinistyy's sentencing, the other members of the gang managed to evade criminal prosecution. In December 2009, Sergei Gelmanov, a member of Yuri Glinistyy's gang who had been in hiding, was arrested. During a search of his apartment, officers found and seized more than 250 rounds of ammunition for firearms, a passport, a driver's license, and other documents. Moreover, the names in all the documents were different, but the photograph was the same. Also, during the investigation, another member of the gang was identified, nicknamed Sasha Malenki, who participated in the armed robberies. But no one has revealed the identity of this criminal, which is why the criminal case against him is still ongoing. Information about the capture of Alexander Sushchenko, who was put on the federal wanted list as of today. Most likely, he continues to evade criminal prosecution. Write in the comments what you think about this case. Leave likes or dislikes. Check out the Telegram channel and watch other videos on the Strashnota channel on YouTube. They come out even if you don't always get notifications about them.